Hi, I'm Dane. I'm an addict.
Hey, Dane.
First of all, yes, thank you so much for allowing me to come and share with you guys today. I thought I was gonna go under the radar this year, but then the share guy came to our Toti meeting, and God kind of fetched me from Toti to just come share my story, which is quite cool. As well, so I'm really grateful to be here today. You know, I wasn't supposed to be here, in a way, like the way I live my life, and I'm very emotional today, sorry. But yeah, like the way I live my life, I just wasn't supposed to be here. And I thank God every day that I found this program that He set me on this road to recovery, you know, where I can live a full life, you know, that has meaning today. And it's just so incredible. Like, I wish everybody could find recovery, you know. So yeah, let me start kind of from the beginning. I don't want to harm too much on the past. But I asked God, what do I need to share today? And I opened my basic text, and it was a story just like mine. You know, I opened the book and I started crying, crying at everything it seems. But it was my story written in the back of that book. Can't remember the name, but it's on page 224. That I remember. But it was my story, and this chick was just talking about her life, and I'm like, there's me again. You know, I found so many people in these rooms who just keep on telling my story, and it's a miracle to me that I finally found my tribe. So yeah, as a child, what really stands out for me is I lived in a complete fantasy world. I was not connected to reality at all. From a very young age, I felt different, and people didn't understand me, and I didn't understand them, and it was just all very weird to me. I didn't want to live at my parents' house. Although my mom tried her best to give me a good childhood, you know, I just didn't see it that way. My perception was just off, like it is with everything, you know. I have a disease of perception. But I didn't want to live with her. I was always off in the garden, playing some fantasy game, or even when I was in the house, I wasn't really there. So from a very young age, I started disconnecting myself from reality and living in this fantasy world. And that's kind of where I stayed for the rest of my life until I found recovery. It was safe for me to live there, you know, nobody could harm me there, and it was my little world. I cried a lot as a kid. I really just didn't want to be there. You know, my mom would sometimes leave me at home and she would just leave. And I would sit under the table. I was 3 years old, but I still remember it. She would just leave because she couldn't take the crying anymore. When she came back, I was still crying. So I was a very difficult child, and I gave my mom a lot of uphill, and she didn't really know what to do with me. You know, even pre-primary, and that the kids I just couldn't get along with other people. My mom cut our hair really, really short, so they always thought I was a boy, which didn't help. And I left many schools because of that, because I couldn't take being so different and standing out in that way. But life got a bit better when I started going to big school. I did feel very stupid because I didn't have the pre-primary experience, and that again just set me in a box, you know, to the side. I was not like the other kids. The teacher would be like, what color is this? And they would say, yellow and red. And I'm like, how do you know this stuff? How do you know? Because they went to preschools. And so I just felt different again. So I just winged it, you know. I just kept my head down, and I got through primary school, and then I really didn't want to stay with my mom anymore. When I was 13, we were having a fight in the kitchen, and one of her best friends walked in and she said, why don't you just go to boarding school? And my mom and I stopped fighting immediately, and we looked at each other and we're like, that's it, that's where I'm going to go. So they couldn't deal with me, I couldn't deal with them. They shipped me off to boarding school, and I was very, very happy not being at home. And that's also where I kind of found myself, you know, who I wanted to be, And of course, I started drinking and using at the age of 14. So, like, I used and drank for 19 years before I found recovery. And that's a really long time. You know, I was still a kid when I started. So, what I knew about life was all just what I thought about life. I had no real life experience. But I carried on for about a year, and my mom saw like something's out because over the weekends I would come home and I would sleep the whole weekend, because during the week I was just busy drinking and using and not sleeping and trying out new drugs and just getting up to no good, you know, in a safe environment. But yeah, man, as soon as I got that pinky, I took the hand and it was all just downhill from there. I really wanted to live with my dad because my mom at that point got a new boyfriend. She got a divorce from my dad, which was really hard on me. But she wanted to move to Durban with this new guy that I didn't really know because I was never home. But I didn't want to have any of it. I wanted to stay with my dad because he would let me just do whatever I wanted to do. And my mom was like the feisty one, enforcing rules, and I didn't want to go, but she made me. I still remember the day she picked me up, and I cried in the car from Heidelberg to Toti. I just cried the whole day. And that's kind of what my high school years were like, you know. I hated my mom. I didn't want to stay in her house. I didn't want to be there. So I found anything that would take me out of that reality. And I started with alcohol. So like at 14 years old or 15, I would, at night, I struggled to sleep. So I would drink my mom's wine. I would steal her wine. And she had a white wine in the one cupboard and a red wine in the other one. And I would just take turns, you know. I'd go to the kitchen, steal a glass, maybe down it in the kitchen, or walk to my room and down it, and then go for it again. Now, I didn't know this was like, behavioral wise, it wasn't okay, you know, because nobody was telling me what to do. And then I found, shortly after that, I found my first like drug of choice. You know, people often ask me like, what was your drug of choice? And I'm like, what wasn't? Because if I found something that I liked, I kept it. And I would mix and match as the years rolled by. But I finally found one of the first ones that I really liked, and it was just non-stop from there. You know, I woke up in the mornings and I smoked on my way to school. I would be high at school and people would think, I don't know what they thought, but they knew like something was off with me, you know. I wanted dreads and I looked like shit most of the time, but I was high most of the time, just to get me through that high school experience, because I didn't want to be there. I didn't see the point, and I was very, very unhappy. So my nights would consist of me stealing my mother's wine, getting high, and drawing or listening to music in my room, and until I could go out and party. Then I was almost never home again because I was always off with friends, partying. You know, that's where I found myself, was in the parties. I just didn't want to be home, be in my reality. I felt weird, and like everybody else kind of got this handbook to life, and I just didn't. I didn't know how people just do life. But so as soon as my high school years were finished, but in the high school years I also started experimenting with other drugs, you know, over-the-counter stuff, pharmaceuticals, and I would always play the field. Like I would take an upper then a downer, then an upper then a downer, and that's how it stayed throughout my addiction. I didn't just stick with one drug, I was always on several different drugs to try and control how I feel. You know, but after high school, as soon as I could get out of there, I was out of there. And it wasn't my fault at all, you know, it was all my mom's fault. Until I got to rehab, I blamed my mom for every single thing that went wrong with me because of my childhood, because of how it was then. But anyways, after school I moved to Joburg to my dad's, where I studied and I partied even more. And I can't even remember what happened, but I think I moved back to my mom's house because that was my thing. If I screwed up enough and I had enough, then I would move. You know, I would do these geographicals to try and get away from myself. But I could never get away from myself because where I went there, I was. You know, so it was just really, really frustrating to be me for most of my life. But I moved up and down and partied harder, you know, did more drugs or didn't do drugs but substituted with this. And I had a thought one day at my mother's house, I think I was 17 years old, where the thought came, maybe you're really an alcoholic. And I was like, nope, not that. You know, so I would just deny that I had a problem. But then at one stage, where was I? In Joburg, I met, let's call him X number one, for the sake of the story. I met him and I decided this is the guy. Like, we're going to go on this big road trip and I'm going to sell all my stuff because I had done some pretty shitty things in Joburg. I was in my blackout drinking phase at that point, and I just wanted to get away from it all. I could look nobody in the eye, and I felt just so ashamed of myself. So of course, like, my answer was just move away. Where nobody knows you, you know. So we did that. I convinced him to sell all his stuff. I sold all my stuff, and we went on a road trip until our money ran out, and I phoned my mom crying, and I was like, we're stuck. Of course, what were we thinking, you know? But that's how I lived my life. I didn't think about the future. I only thought about how am I going to satisfy myself now. That's all I ever thought about was me and how I felt and how I was going to just feel better, you know, and avoid my problems. Anyway, she sent the money and we ended up in the Karoo at his dad's house. We lived in a caravan, which I thought was so cool because I always wanted to live in a caravan. Meanwhile, we're living in a caravan in the Karoo, you know? Like, there's nothing cool about that, man. So, like, we did that for a while until his dad became too abusive and I just couldn't take it anymore and we ran away to my mom's house again. Geographical. And we stuck around in Toti and Unko for a few years until I caught him doing drugs. And I was like, I'll be having none of this, thank you. Like, how dare you? And I tried to help him, but meanwhile I was still drinking and smoking my drug of choice at that time, but I didn't see anything wrong with me. Like, I was still fine, you know, I could handle my shit. So when I caught him, I tried to help him. We took him to psychiatrists, and I took him to the treatment center where I would land up a couple of years later. And I just remember walking in there, and it's this beautiful house, and it's just like so peaceful. And I was like, how do you not want to go here? Like, just, dude, like, I mean, I would pay to go here. You know, but he wouldn't go, so I left him. Back to Joburg I went, and that's where I met X number two. It's X number two, I think, yeah. The father of my kids. And that was the most painful part of my life. I don't often talk about this part of my life because, I don't know, just going back there, it's just so painful. And like, a big part of me thinks I still need outside help just to work through all the trauma and stuff that I went through with him. But it was so painful. I mean, I fell in love with this guy. He was standing with his back against me, and I was like, this is my guy, you know? He's like, listen to me how I make life choices, it's ridiculous. But I did, and I felt it, you know? I went on that feeling like, he's the one. But anyway, we started dating. Sorry, I'm going to backtrack a bit. Before I met him, and then I met the girl who introduced me to the drug that would bring me to my knees. She was in Joburg and she was trying to get this magazine off the ground, and I really, at that point in my life, I felt so useless and just, where do I belong? You know, like, I keep screwing up, nothing works out, the people I love don't love me back. What am I going to do? And I knew going into this relationship with this girl that it's going to be a big party because she was known for just using and not giving. you know. So when I went to go see her, I was like, yes, I'm interested. I moved in with her and I slept on a mattress in the art room, in her spare room, also thinking I'm super cool, you know, living the dream, surrounded by art supplies, and a mattress I got from my dad's garage, and everybody was just looking at me going, what are you doing? But we had fun until I had too much fun, you know. She was telling me that we can't use this much, and that to me was a problem. I was like, well, what do you mean? I'm only getting started. You can't tell me now to put on the brakes. So I made up some excuse. I told her I want to get off the drugs, and I moved in with my ex, and then it just escalated, you know, because I was on this drug and everybody around me was on different drugs, and I was so superior, you know. That period of my life, I probably felt the most superior that I ever had, because I chose to use with people who I thought were lesser than me, you know, and people who were way worse off. The women I used with already lost their kids, and I promised myself I'll never get there, you know. So I was above them in my mind. But so it went on, and I was with this guy, and it was just terrible from the beginning, and I just kept convincing myself that it was going to be okay because he loves me. And so I fell pregnant. We were living in the middle of Brakpan. Like, you don't want to live there. It was, even I knew, like, you know, it's not what I pictured for my life at all, but I just kept convincing myself that it was going to be okay, and we're going to get out of this, and he kept promising, and I fell pregnant, and I thought maybe this is my way out, you know. And I stopped using, of course, and I had my baby, and my mom helped me get a flat so that we could have a good environment for the kid, you know, because that's what I always wanted. I never wanted to turn into my parents. If I had kids, I wanted to have them in a stable environment, white picket fence, parents who love each other, and I tried my level best to do that, but it just wouldn't work because I was an addict. And all the motives that I had might have been good, but when it gets to my will and God's will, I'll just never win. You know, I was totally running my life on self-will, and God was just nowhere to be seen. So we had this baby, and 6 months later, I was back to using full-time, and eventually I left my ex because I just couldn't do the craziness anymore. It was just crazy all the time. There was no, like, just let's chill. And I kept making it his problem, you know. I kept telling him, let's stop using. And he said, okay, let's, and we just wouldn't stop. So I made it his responsibility. My using, I put in his hands, you know. But we just never stopped. And eventually I left him, and I moved into my own little place. And I think that's the first time that I realized that I cannot stop using. Because here I was, a single mom, having my kid with me, and I couldn't stop using. I would pick up with my son in the car. I did all those things. I took him to like a crack house one night. I even got into a relationship with my ex's dad. And my way of seeing it was, I'm trying to protect myself from him, you know, but I was getting back at him too, you know. I think it was a bit of both. But that's how sick I was, like convincing myself of all of these things, having a relationship with his dad, and still just using my life away. Long story short, we got back together, and I fell pregnant with twins, and we moved into a flat in Germiston, and it was okay, you know. I still had a job. I managed to keep a job for 3 years, and I had my twins, and thank God, because I was on a medical aid by then, and I had to go for a C-section, and stuff just kind of, God had me. He really had me. But it's in that flat where I started realizing that this is not okay. The way I'm living my life is not okay. I'm in fear most of the time. Cannot stop using once again. because I did stop using for a while, but I was a substitute user. I would always substitute one for another. If I wasn't using my drug of choice, I was smoking whatever, drinking whatever. You know, there was always something to just stabilize my mood or help me with my feelings or not deal with them. And I carried on like that for another year. And I was in a lot of pain. I was struggling to keep up. Eventually I quit my job. I just couldn't do it with 3 kids, using, being tired. I just couldn't do it anymore. And that's when we moved into, I call it the nightmare house, because that was the most painful period of my life. You know, so he kept promising everything's going to be okay. We're going to move into this house. It's going to be fine. It's this big house. I'm like, okay, great, let's give it a go. And within, I think, 6 months, I was back living with my mom. Because I couldn't do it. I couldn't stop using drugs. I couldn't look after my kids. You know, I could provide for their physical needs, like I gave them food, I could give them a bath, but I couldn't sit for long enough and play with them because I had to use. You know, I couldn't be a present mom for them. He was never home, so I felt really lonely. And he was busy with some pretty scary things, you know. He was involved with some very dangerous people, and he was involved with the cops too. So he was kind of playing both sides of the fence, and I was alone at home with our kids, and that made me extremely paranoid. I had to sell my car because people were looking for us, things like that, you know. I was so paranoid. I'm like, what kind of life is this for me, for my kids? We can't even go outside and feel safe, especially if he's there. But at that point, I was so ashamed and so lonely and so sad that I didn't even want to go to the shop anymore. I was so scared just to put my foot out that house. And deep down I knew, if I leave now, I have to stop using drugs. And so I kept myself and my kids in that pain for a really long time. But then once again, you know, God intervened. And it wasn't in the way that I thought it was going to happen, but the story is really, it's like still scary to me when I think about it. Like I was standing in the kitchen and I heard a car and the bars on the windows started vibrating, you know, and I was thinking, what is this? And this car stops in my driveway, and it's got 4 guys with guns in it, and it's the middle of the day, and I am high as a kite, and my kids are playing outside, and he's not there, he was never there, and I had to like run and get my kids in the house, and I closed the doors, and such a weird house because it had like these steel things that you can put in the back. I was like, okay, just put the steel things in. And that's the day when my first surrender came. And I sent my mom a message and I was like, I need to get out of here. You know, and even in that moment, I like stalled because I knew can't use. If I go to my mom, can't use anymore. And I stalled and I was like, Dane, you can't do this. You know, your lives are literally at stake right now. My dad wasn't speaking to me at that point because he knew what I was busy with. But I asked my mom to phone my dad to if we could just go sleep at his house for a while. And I packed my kids up that day and we went to my dad's house, and I think a week later I was safe at my mother's house with my children, and it was just crazy, man, for me to go through all of that and to put my kids through that, you know. It was the wake-up call I needed to get out of there, drugs or no drugs. And 2 weeks later, he showed up at my house, and 1 hour later, I was back to using with him in the car. So he hooked me up with a dealer, and he left again, and that's when I started using out of control. I couldn't go for 40 minutes without using, and my life just felt like a circle. You know, like it was just going around in circles and there's nothing I could do about it. I was walking around thinking, how am I going to kill myself? how is it not going to be messy? Can I just drive myself into a tree or go jump in the ocean? But the thought of not being there for my kids like was stronger. You know, like I couldn't picture my life without my children. And it's so funny to me because when I was put in a safe environment with my mom, my kids were taken care of, I got a job, but I was so unhappy, and that's the time when I couldn't stop using. I couldn't blame the outside forces anymore. I couldn't blame anybody else but myself, because everybody around me was just trying to help me and love me, and here I was driving to the dealer, avoiding my children, working crazy hours just not to be at home. You know, so I kind of realized, okay, it's me, I'm the problem, I can't stop using. And I was just bursting out in tears one night as well, where this was like such a total moment of clarity, where I just connected to the fact that I cannot deal with my reality right now. It is too painful for me to try and feel what's really going on. And thank God my mom saw all of this. We were standing in the kitchen one night and she said, "Dane, I'm worried about you." And I said, "I'm worried about me too." And that's the first time I actually said something. You know, and I was walking around thinking, how am I going to tell my mom I'm on drugs? Like, I need help, but I don't know how to say I need help. I didn't think of the sentence, I need help. In my mind, it was either I'm on drugs or I'm going to kill myself, but I couldn't get to that I need help sentence. So I started praying to God, a God who I felt did not hear me. The prayers were jumping off the roof as I was saying them, but I actually went on my knees and I asked God to expose me, to help me, because I couldn't help myself and I couldn't say the words I'm on drugs. And about a week later, my mom held an intervention, and they walked in and I said, "This is an intervention," and they said yes. I said, "I'll be back just now." And all she asked me is like, "Do you need help?" And I said yes, and I started crying. And that afternoon I was off to that same treatment centre that I booked ex-boyfriend number 1 into, or tried to. And she said to me, "Mom, you're really going to love this place." And I said, "Is it a white house and it's big and nature?" And she said, "Yes." I said, "I know exactly where we're going." And I'm so grateful to go. And I remember going up to the driveway and these big gates, and I was freaked out, you know, because I had a packet of drugs in my mouth still, because I just bought it. And as much as I needed help, I was still crazy and I couldn't picture my life without using it, you know. And I really wanted to spit it out, but then my mom would know, so I just kept it in my mouth, and later I swallowed it. I even ate a banana in front of people, you know, like, I don't have drugs. It's crazy. But I remember when that guy booked me in and he asked me, "So like, why are you here?" And I just said, "I can't do this anymore," because I was so tired. I think my surrender came at the exact right time that it needed to. I mean, God made a way for everything to work out so perfectly, you know. There was no way I was ever going to get help if my kids weren't safe. And my mom had them, and I knew they were safe. And that allowed me to say, okay, yes, I'll go to treatment. I would have never gotten help if I was by myself in Joburg or whatever. But he asked me and I said, "I'm tired, I can't do this anymore." And I really didn't know what was going to happen. I remember walking in there and seeing people on the grass, holding hands in a circle, and I was like, this is a cult. And the other part of my brain went, we don't care anymore. Like, if it's a cult, whatever. You know, like, I'm willing to try anything at this point just to get some relief, to get rid of the pain. So I did. I started my steps in there, and it was a hard experience, and it was weird, you know, but I felt so safe. I shared the other day, when I went to rehab, I felt so safe because I wasn't in control of my life. I didn't make the decisions. I couldn't get in my car and drive to the dealer. I just felt so safe and taken care of. There was like a routine and everything. It was just right up my alley. You know, I was like, I can do this. Cool, thank you. So I did step one. I did a proper step one, I feel. I really saw just how powerless I was in my disease. I realized that I have a disease and that it's stronger than me and it talks like me, but it's not me, you know. Step one was really powerful to me, and I just remember sitting there thinking, how does this book know what's going on inside my head? How does it know, like, who I am and what I'm thinking? But as I did my steps, they made us do meetings every day, and that's through the meetings and the H&I people who came into the facilities where I kind of found my trust in the program. It was people sharing in meetings about their disease and the way they were thinking that made me realize these people are like me, because I felt like an alien, like nobody got me. But these people, you guys, are like me. You think like me, you see the world like me, and that's when the steps really started taking shape in my life, you know. And the people from H&I who also came in and shared their life story, every Saturday was like my favorite, you know, because like the counselors told us, I'm ages clean, and I was like, you're lying. I didn't trust anybody, but it's so strange, the people from H&I who came in, I was like, that's a cool story, I can relate to that. And that's just kind of how the journey started, and it's been such an incredible ride. My first year was just all recovery meetings, inventory, you name it. I did about 4 to 5 meetings a week. My second year was the hardest year so far for me in recovery. It was the year that I felt like, what? It was so emotionally draining, but I had to admit where I was at to my sponsor. You know, I was falling apart yet again on the inside, and I had to admit to God, to my sponsor, where I was at, and I restarted my steps. And I think one of my favorite steps is step 2, because all you really got to do is be willing to believe, you know, just be willing, and if you're not even willing, you can just pray for the open-mindedness from God. And step 2 till today just works such miracles in my life. You know, when I think I don't believe something, I just ask for God's guidance to show me, to guide me, and to give me the willingness, and He does. And suddenly I believe something, and I'm like, wow. You know, it's just such an incredible step. But as I was working the steps in the rehabilitation facility, those kind of things were happening in my life. I remember when I was on step 3, my ex came back to town, and I was still very afraid of him. And he was spending time with my kids, but I had to see there in step 3 that it's out of my control, you know, like, give your will in your life over to God and He'll take care of the rest. And that's what I love so much about this program, is it's really the only thing that I need to be focusing on, because if I'm focusing on doing this, everything else just kind of falls into place. It's been like such a crazy cool experience, and I'm just so grateful today that I am clean and I don't have to use drugs anymore just to cope and function, and I can be a mom to my kids, you know, I can be present and I can take responsibility, sometimes unwillingly, but I take it, and I need a lot of help from my sponsor still. I've convinced myself so many times that, like, I'm okay for now, and then I just realize all over again, shit, I need more help than I think I do. And that's when I reach out to my sponsor, and I do more meetings, and I do more step work, you know. So it's been so incredible, and I thank you, God, you know, like, I wouldn't change it for anything in the world. My life today is so full with the good things, you know, not material things, the spiritual things. The relationship with my mother that I'm getting back is one of the most coolest things that has happened to me this year. She's in Cape Town now, and she's actually sending me photos and videos of what they're doing, and I can respond, and we have a relationship today, and I used to blame her for everything. You know, that's like a miracle to me. So yeah, thank you for letting me share.